Now, here is a book I stumbled across recently, The Finding of the Third Eye by Vera Stanley Alder. And I cannot remember where I first heard about this, but I was intrigued and I found a copy. Of course, it's always a massive disappointment to find an old book and then discover the mark of the beast on the back of it, which tells you it's a reissue from the 80s. Because this book was first published 1938. Then I think this paperback was 1970, and this is a printing, I think, from the 80s. But it was funny seeing it came from some New Age bookshop, the Inner Bookshop, 111 Magdalen Road. How about that for an address? And this picture, you could say, it looks very sort of theosophical. But to be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove, you might say. But I'm always very attracted to very out-of-date things. If you call something out of date, it's like a moth to a flame for me. So I like to read these things before they're infected by political correctness. And it's always very interesting to read anything published that was originally published before World War II, where everything we've lived in since has been some sort of Talmudic simulacrum of corporate fascist culture. So whenever you see something described as out of date, it's you wonder what is being rewritten. Now, I suppose if I read through this entire book, I probably would become enlightened. It'd be like a fourth way exercise, like Gurdjieff telling you to dig a ditch or to mow the lawn with a pair of nail scissors. But I thought I might just read one chapter. Secrets of colour, secrets of breathing, birth, sleep and death, male and female. Perhaps the most controversial of all topics. This is us, this is what's going on here. The physical body, the etheric, the astral, the mental, the spiritual, the center of power, the link with wisdom. I presume this is meant to be a depiction of an unvaccinated person. We can only guess. And then astrology. The astrology chapter itself might be worth reading. Now, I know a lot of people just consider astrology nonsense, but I find it interesting to think of it in terms of archetypes. Because if you think of the wheel as like a wheel of the year, that we go on this journey through the seasons as we're are we in Capricorn or Sagittarius? I think we're coming into Sagittarius now. I mean, a good exercise you could do if one wanted to experiment is for each month of the year, take on the characteristics of each astrology sign from month to month. And, if you study what are the main archetypal features of each sign, and then when you go into that month, Sagittarius, Scorpio, imagine what it would be like to react from that mythological center of power. Because some people would naturally be more introvert or extrovert. Some will be more, left brain, right brain. Some will be more perfectionist. Some will be more relaxed. It's an interesting expansion of thought to go through each month, playing with those characteristics to see if you could embody them in your day-to-day life. Of course, I accept no responsibility for improving your consciousness and quitting your job. Male and female, yeah, that's one chapter can't really be read on YouTube for obvious reasons. Secrets of breathing. You could call this era the era of the mouth breathers. Colors. Interesting to read this chapter and compare it to the rainbow flag. As we get indigo and violet being the highest chakras, which seem inverted for our rainbow friends. Secrets of sound, numbers. So part 2, it's the third eye. So let us see if our ancestors have any vital information from us in this antediluvian relic of the pre-technocratic age. Okay. In the preceding chapters, a bird's eye view has been taken of the conditions surrounding developing humanity, the possible fruits of a deeper understanding of various aspects of life have been considered, such aspects, for instance, as the planetary influences by whose aid we develop, and which we can study through astrology and numbers, and by their manifestations through colour, sound, and form. A little research has brought to light the possibility that the discoveries of men of science today may coincide with the knowledge of the mystics of all times, with the difference only of presentation and nomenclature, and the fact that the mystics always postulated an ultimate cause and law behind all phenomena, while present-day scientists seem afraid to link up with such big issues. Finally, we have considered the perfecting of our physical life through more intelligent control of diet, exercise, and the human relationships. Let us now draw away the veil still further and take a peep at what may be the future awaiting man when he struggles out of the rut of materialism and finally takes the reins of his life into his own hands. It looks as if the powers that be are tantalizing humanity into making this effort, because they are allowing hints and bits of knowledge to filter through in a more general way than ever before. We find all sorts of unexpected people playing enthusiastically with these jewels as if they were bright new toys. Premonition of YouTube there. On every hand, we hear glib talk of trances, visions, healings, and divine guidance. We hear of intimate relationships with the masters, of mystic experiences upon the path. We are given full details of initiations, reincarnations, and magic black and white. Hundreds of societies and cults with scores of teachers have sprung up everywhere, like a mushroom growth, or a mushroom cult, you could even say. And of course, they mostly claim to be the especial instrument of the Great White Lodge. Now, it may be that many of these people are childish, and that some of them remain materialistic and jealous, and even profiteer with their spiritual goods. Nevertheless, two things stand out. Firstly, there is a growing widespread demand for enlightenment on these subjects, and a deepening sense of the existence of such knowledge. Secondly, everything that is being given and everywhere bears the same stamp, posits the same laws, and makes fundamentally the same promises, in spite of superficial and surface differences. It would all appear to come from one original source, and that source to have been the very ancient teachings of the greatest sages and mystics of all times, which has existed the world over in much the same form. And although people are still perhaps infantile and naive over the treasures of knowledge so freshly represented to them, yet their interest is intense and their numbers are growing. Furthermore, as in all their various forms, these teachings yet tally in laying emphasis on brotherhood, unselfishness, generosity, and peace. They would seem to form some kind of opposition to the propensities for slaughter, oppression, greed, and selfishness, which are causing widespread havoc in various parts of the world. True, among these cults are to be found many cranks, hypocrites, and other undesirables, but these people would exist in any case. They may have more chance of regeneration where they are. It is necessary always to distinguish between the teaching and the teacher. It is possible to learn beautiful truths from a very unbeautiful character, who in that way may be working off his karmic debts. The great revival of interest in occult subjects began towards the close of the last century. It is said that the close of any century ushers in a foretaste of the knowledge to be assimilated in the next. Certain it is that 50 years ago, written in 1937, there was an intense pioneering activity in research, both occult and scientific. The theosophists, Christian scientists and spiritualists, the hypnotists, the mesmerists and healers resulted from these activities, to which were drawn many eminent men and women of their time, who have left behind a wealth of printed records of their studies and testified experiments. Much of all of these results may be doubted by the skeptics, but there is no smoke without fire. The impartial inquirer will do well to observe that in all these diverse activities, much the same type of manifestations, information, and mysterious laws appear to have come to light. Those who are studying these things from the mental and philosophical angle were headed by a remarkable woman called H.B. Blavatsky, whose strange personality seemed rather divorced from her profound and level-headed teachings. She made a deep and exhaustive search into ancient Eastern mystical records and produced almost an encyclopedia upon the subject in her Secret Doctrine and other books. The Theosophists, headed by Annie Besant, carried on the work. During the same period, a very ancient sect called the Rosicrucians were allowed to begin to give out a little of their knowledge to the public. Some of this work was accomplished by Rudolf Steiner and men like Max Heindel. The less intellectually inclined were provided for by the spiritualists, Christian scientists, Mesmer, Dr. Kuh, and others. Everything was done by fair means, and possibly foul, to awaken people to a sense of the potency of the inner worlds. The seeds thus sown germinated and persisted. Today there is a big field of these activities which excites little comment because it has grown to be a part of the life of the public. What are the principal elements of the more exalted of these teachings? We hear first of all of the great plan for the evolution of humanity, which develops through spirit ensouling 7 great races and dwelling on 7 great continents, of which Lemuria and then Atlantis were the first 2. The earth itself is to have 7 successive incarnations before becoming spiritualized. All this is only a tiny little cog in the wheel of planetary evolution. Planets come into successive births just as does humanity, both individually and collectively, and so do solar systems. Presiding over our solar system is the hierarchy, and all their staff of graded helpers mentioned in the Bible as the 7 spirits before the throne, the archangels, angels, cherubim, and seraphim. Humanity is in the school of earth, graduating to be qualified to fill such exalted positions in the dim future. The first to pass these mystic examinations, called initiations, will be ready to replace those of the celestial company who are promoted to higher positions. Having attained such status, they have no longer any need of earth lessons, but they sometimes elect to come back to help humanity and set them an example of the perfect human life, as did Jesus Christ, the Buddha, and many others in earliest history. In fact, we are told that the gods themselves instructed humanity at the dawn of history, at which time humanity was entirely conscious of the inner world and had gradually to learn to become aware of the crystallizing physical plane. The gods are those members of the hierarchy who are in charge of the elements and the different forces of nature, have always been appreciated throughout the ages and worshipped in excellent symbolical form by such peoples as the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Chinese. All these faiths in their original root form acknowledged the one God over all. For instance, if we study the revival of that pure religion as it was cultivated by King Akhenaten, we will see that he founded it upon a former faith existing thousands of years previous to his time, which worshipped the one God. Some people think this is the origin of Moses and the Hebrews rewriting older texts, but that's just conjecture. We are told that humanity has had to pass through a long dark age of materialism in which to learn to master physical matter by its own means. This accomplished, it will rise once more from the maya, or illusion, of the importance of matter and focus its eyes upon the real inner world of causes and realities. Human beings were built originally, we are told, with a special organ with which to register the finer vibrations of the physical world, the realm of the ethers. This organ was known, as we have said, as the third eye. The third eye is placed between the other two at the root of the nose and has its seat near the pineal gland. It is said that the earliest people of all used only the middle eye and were known as the Cyclops. We are told that during the embryonic development of the human species, at first man's only organ was one which he used to feel with and to differentiate between heat and cold. In time, this organ recessed, and the first sense of touch spread all over the nervous system and through the skin. Apparently, man's second organ to develop was his one eye, which he used to see all non-solid matter, which was all that existed at the time. As the earth solidified, man developed his two physical eyes with which to view the solid world, and his second organ recessed, its etheric sight spreading all over the nervous system and having its seat in the solar plexus. It is said each of man's five senses will eventually spread all over his body in the same way. The capacity for sight in the lower, non-solid etheric portion of the physical plane is therefore one of the most primitive involuntary functions which man shares with the animals. It is only when this ability is brought by willpower and training under the control of man's higher faculties and made to work in conjunction with the centers in his head that it becomes of real value. Thus coordinated, all three activities are often loosely classed under the heading of the third eye, and for the present it will simplify matters if we sometimes do this also. As physical eyesight developed, the etheric eye recessed, but although dormant at present in most people, it is only awaiting development and training to be reawakened. This training is a part of deliberate mystical development, which was well understood and thoroughly provided for in the ancient temples. No higher ruler or pharaoh was eligible without such training. The fact of his finished apprenticeship was announced by a knob upon the forehead of a statue representing the awakened third eye, or by a serpent's head rearing from his own to show that he had raised the Kundalini serpent. The Chinese mandarin wore a peacock's feather in his headdress to represent the same development. The functioning of the third eye puts the individual in touch with the greater part of the physical world, all that part which is invisible to the physical eyesight. The physical world is divided, as is all else, into 7 interpenetrating planes or strata. These are solid, liquid, gaseous, and 4 kinds of ether. The physical eye can register or see the vibrations of the first 3. The third eye can voluntarily register or see the vibrations of the 4 ethers. Certain creatures and types of activity, such as human beings and waterfalls, have their final outer expression in solid form. Many other beings and types of activity have their final outer expression in ether form, or etheric matter as it is called. For instance, we are told that the angels have an etheric body as their outer coat instead of a solid physical one as we have, and that this is because aeons ago, at the time when they went through this human or individualizing stage, the ether was the densest condition of matter in existence. When the third eye is opened, the individual begins to see all the manifold creatures and activities of the ether, and he approaches much nearer to the causes and realities of life. The mind can have power over everything which it can visualize. Therefore, while man is thus studying and learning to comprehend life in the ethers, he is able to develop the power to use and control some of this life. He sees, for instance, exactly what his thoughts are and what happens to them. Once he has thoroughly comprehended the region of thought, he uses and controls his thinking apparatus to much greater purpose. He also studies the records of the Earth's history which exist in the ethers in photographic form. He also gains an acquaintance with the plane described as the 4th dimension, the power to penetrate with one sight or consciousness in every direction at once, and backwards and forwards through time. Time and space are physical attributes, but only an infinitesimal fraction of their limits can be apprehended by the senses while using their fleshly encasements. The yogi or sage who wishes to know truth at first hand and to study the workings of the universe sets himself earnestly and patiently to reawaken his third eye into activity, using time-worn and tested methods. He proceeds to study the conditions in each of the four ethers. He gradually accustoms himself to discriminate between and sum up the unaccustomed intricacies of interpenetrating, mobile and changing activities. The task is extraordinarily difficult and unimaginable to the ordinary man, but the sage has access to instructions and help of which many of our less advanced mediums and psychics of the West are ignorant. Truth is the essence of purity, and therefore, as the sage knows, can only be contacted by one of a like vibration. Therefore, the wise one acknowledges the first step to be the attaining of a condition of purity, purity of motive and purity of living, a very little understood condition. He next works to bring the brain under the complete subjection of his will instead of at the mercy of outside influences. By a series of carefully planned exercises, he trains his mental equipment in much the same way as a dancer trains her muscles. The dancer gains complete control of her body at the cost of tremendous work and sacrifice. The sage, for about the same cost of effort, gains complete control of the mind. And if you don't do this while you're watching TV or going to the cinema or turning on the radio, you are being programmed and reprogrammed. The mind is a very powerful instrument. We cannot say much about it at this juncture except that it can be compared with material of electrical constituency, which has, if concentrated to one point, the same burning quality as fire. If a mind is divided upon several thoughts, its burning force is dispersed in various directions. If concentrated upon one point, it becomes as a burning glass to the sun of its own ego. The effort of the yogi or any spiritual aspirant is directed towards achieving one-pointedness of the mind. With this sharp instrument, he can then bore through all the shells of illusion to the very truth and essence of all life. He can then deliberately wield and mound with his mind creative patterns which will help to shape the future. He is no longer confined to the haphazard creative efforts of the average man. He can create from the inside with the invisible sources of all things. With such capacities, he can heal, prophesy, and teach from the source of truth. Such attributes the true Christian also is dedicated to seek, because they are the gifts of the Holy Ghost. In 1958, a controversy in the press has taken place regarding accusations levelled at Dr. Kwan, author of The Third Eye, in which details are given of an operation said to be performed by Tibetan monks for the purpose of producing the functions of the third eye. As these functions are also those of the 7 gifts of the Holy Ghost, one might just as well declare it possible to have an operation on the brain to make one overnight into a good and fulfilled Christian. It is a question not of physical tissue, but of heightened vibrations. Surely an unnatural operation of the kind described would belong in the realm of black magic. Also, on this point, it often feels like the sleeping masses, aka normies, aka NPCs, have the collective energetic force of their unconscious mind being used by the parasites that be to help actually create the reality we're living in, such as putting a mask on their face. So it's like it's like humanity is a battery generator generating reality, and those who are asleep generating the reality of the ruling class, while the black sheep, phoenix, breaking free, realizes they can begin to create their own life in co-creation. such like. Okay, let's continue. To do these things, however, is not enough to have opened the third eye, or the eye of the soul. This knowledge of the universe must be linked with the highest creative force within the body before creative activity can follow. The seat of this creative force is in the throat, in the thyroid gland. When the magnetism of the soul dominates the body, it draws up reserve force from the base of the spine, where it was used for the animal nature, to the throat, as we mentioned in the description of the Kundalini serpent. This fire of creative force can then be used for inspired creative work of various kinds. But the highest expression of the power of the throat center lies in the spoken word. God spoke and created the world. Christ spoke and called to the dying to arise and walk. You know, it's fascinating how you can actually get a sore throat by not speaking when there's something in you that needs to be spoken. We actually start manifesting these ailments with our body, and then we think there's something wrong with our body when the body is just trying to tell us there's something wrong with our mind, soul, and emotions not being processed. So the more unprocessed the emotions, the worse the disease and illness, I think. Man is a god in the making, and the goal is waiting before him. When once he has set his feet firmly upon the path of attainment, his earnest aspirations will burn the dross out of his body and mind. Then, by degrees, the centers of force located within his 7 major glands will be enabled to function. These centers, named by the Indians chakras, connect him with the knowledge of and power consciously to work in the different planes of matter. Man's whole mentality can, by this means, to be reorientated and changed from a limited conception of third-dimensional objective life to a broad understanding concerning the why and the wherefore of the universe and his own part in the scheme of things. He achieves a telepathic union with the mind of the being whose body is this solar system, sometimes spoken of as cosmic consciousness. The science of self-development along these lines usually includes special dieting, fasting, breathing, and posture, but the principal aspect of this training is known as meditation. The practice of meditation is creeping into various of the Western cults and occult societies under different guises and, alas, in some cases, incomplete and misconceived forms. However, the germ of the idea has already taken root in the West, and as everything is speeded up nowadays, it may come to be more quickly understood than we could expect. The third factor which is necessary for this attainment of man is the heart. Sequestered in one of the ventricles of the heart is what is called the seed atom of man's physical body. It contains a minute image of the man himself, and his own body is said to be a large replica of it. This seed atom is the little record, the actual essence of the man's personality, the link or channel between him and his soul. It holds the silver cord to the heart, and when it is severed and death occurs, the seed atom leaves the body and is preserved in the subtler realms until the man's reincarnation, when he is formed from it again. We can say, therefore, that the actual man himself, his real personality, his essence, his memory, and all of him that will endure, dwells in the last analysis within the heart. For this reason, all that man learns through training and combining his physical brain with his higher mind must be linked with his heart before it is really his. Christ said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And where a man's heart is, there will his treasure be." The function, action, and quality of the heart is love. Love, in its broadest sense, is the desire for reunion with the divine spirit of the Creator, which permeates all life. Love is the magnet which holds all life together. Its attraction is so strong that nothing can resist it. Through the direct access of the heart to the divine spirit of love or truth come these intuitions, which are always more reliable than the thought-out processes of the brain. Everything which you can love, you can understand. Put limitations to love and you limit life. That is what most of us do. We confine our love to one or two people and possessions and close ourselves to the rest of life. To reach the divine truth, therefore, the heart must desire it. The heart must love it above all else. And then the power of the heart will link the man within it to its illumined mind and brain, the active pineal gland and pituitary body. The perfect triangle will have been formed, the triangle that has been drawn and symbolized and named in so many tongues. I always like to say the heart is a portal to God. I think that's how I would phrase it. Then the birth of the God in man takes place. Unless ye be reborn, we must quote the Christ in this connection, because his great work, we are told, was to flood the earth permanently with his own great spirit of love, to make it possible for humanity to attain the rebirth of the soul through the pure, straight channel of the heart alone. Since his coming, it has no longer been necessary to have strict occult training and deep mental development before spiritual heights can be achieved. From then onwards, the heart has been able to reach illumination through direct union, through love and worship with the great Christ Spirit, and through following the standards set by its embodiment in the man Jesus. The sacrifice of the Christ Spirit in thus bearing the heavy mantle of earth vibrations in order to support the faltering heartbeat of humanity has been greater than we are able to imagine. Humanity would appear to be very slow in taking advantage of it and seems hardly able to grasp the standards set for it as yet. Love thy neighbour as thyself, so simple and so clear, and quite enough to change this tortured earth to a lovely place. Be ye wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Here again we have the serpent as the age-old symbol of the Kundalini serpent, which rises up the spine and links together the great triangle. We can gather that Jesus Christ taught his disciples the science on meditation. Often he took them apart into a high place or plane. We read that one of them even reached the third heaven and learned there of things which no man is allowed to tell. The Buddha sat in meditation for years until he had gained access to the universal knowledge. Such great spirits have done much of the preliminary work for us and have shared with us their knowledge. So all we need to do is to profit by it. It is not necessary for all of us to travel the occult path, to study deeply and to train as mystics. We are all at different stages along the path. We must not overreach ourselves or we will have to retrace our steps. Many of us, in fact, may choose subconsciously to continue with our most vital inner development only during our hours of sleep and to withhold our growing knowledge for the time being from our little waking brain. But it is never too early for any of us to take the quickest way, to begin to learn to love and to clear out all the accumulated rubbish of false thinking, intolerance and greed, which is robbing us of the light of life. Whether we choose to approach the truth through the discipline of study, complex thought and abstruse language, or through the discipline of self-sacrifice and service, the essence of that which we seek remains the same, too simple for words or brain, just a letting go of fear and ambition for the self. We are trying to overcome habits of thought embedded in our personalities for centuries. For some of us, this may only be possible at our present stage through the constant drilling of words. Others may be able to short circuit them by a tremendous effort of love. But however the goal is approached and however it is achieved, let it be borne in mind that the gate of man's deliverance, his birth as a god in human form, is heralded by the reopening of the third eye, after which he will remain no longer blind to everything in life except the tiny excrescence which we call the physical world. It's very interesting to see how much of the contemporary New Age is very old, going back nearly 150 years. On this book written in the 1930s about the craze people had then for the occult. Nothing is new under the sun, you might say. You could say the biggest difference between that sort of theosophical and Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy is they never felt the need to eject Christ from the divine equation, as so much stuff these days talks about, Christ consciousness and cosmic consciousness. But they try and devalue Christianity as much as possible. I mean, some would argue that books like this were designed to lead the sheep astray, but we undoubtedly have higher realms to tap into. I think what they understood was that Christianity was like an ultimate archetype that people could use as a map for their own hero's journey. While now it's only talked about as oppressive Abrahamic death cult, which reduces the possibility of mystery for the individual mystic seeking conversation. That's all it is. I was looking at this because it reminds me of something else too. Ashra Temple. As above, so below. As wise as serpents, as peaceful as doves.